Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Africa, tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. America, tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze.
You are listening to African Father in America podcast by Simon Javan Okelo, live from Seattle, Washington, USA.
Thank you so much for joining me for an incredible session of the Daily African Proverbs recorded for the African Father in America podcast. I am extremely privileged to be with our special guest today. I'm going to introduce him in just a second, but I want to welcome you all to the Daily African Proverbs. This is our last session this week. We do this Monday to Friday. My name is Simon Javan Okelo, and I am the host of this incredible show that has been going on since January 2021. So with me today is Will Jawando, an incredible brother who is also an author of a wonderful book that I hope you will all get a copy of. I'm going to give Will a chance to just briefly introduce himself. And before we go too far, Will, I also want you to share where people are watching and listening earlier on in our conversation can get a copy of the book before we dive deep into our conversation. Go ahead and just add a little bit about yourself. I read your bio. You're quite accomplished. You've worked with the who is who, not just here in the US, but in the world. So I just appreciate you for the humility and the time you created for our platform today. Go ahead and say a few things about yourself.
Sure. It's great to be with you, Simon, and thank you for doing this show and lifting up our culture and supporting our people in various ways. I'm Will Jawando. I'm a council member in Montgomery County, Maryland. I'm also a civil rights attorney. I'm a dad. I'm a father of 4 beautiful children with my wife, Michelle. I'm a Nigerian American. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is where I was born and raised. And I'm the author of my recently released book, My 7 Black Fathers. So I hope that, and we'll talk about that today. But it's good to be with you and really excited about the conversation.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on all the work you do that led to the book, because it's your journey and your story, but also this platform is also for Black fathers, primarily African fathers globally, who are trying their best to leave a legacy and to be examples, to not only their children but to other young men that do not have fathers that are present in their lives. So whenever we gather here for the Daily African Proverbs, we come with African proverbs and we learn from them, we dissect them, and we leave this space with a little bit more wisdom. And so our proverb today is from Mauritius, and it says that the chameleon looks in all directions before moving. And I have a team in Kenya that helps me research these proverbs and identify some of the lessons that we can take away from these proverbs. So the 3 lessons that I want to share before we dive deep into learning more, we will be learning about Will Jawando's thoughts on this proverb. We will be learning about Will's story from childhood that inspires who she is today as a leader. We will also be learning about My 7 Black Fathers, this incredible book. I have a copy myself too. We will learn, a bit of what inspired Will to write this book. We will also learn his favorite excerpt from it, what is his favorite excerpt. Hopefully he will be able to read it for us. And then finally, we will hear from our audience members briefly, just comments from the audience. We have a live audience on Clubhouse, by the way, Will, who are already listening. I want to thank you, Debbie and Rushi and Roger, for joining us. And I want to share the first takeaway. The first one is that it's important to become cautious in order to avoid danger. So note that down somewhere. Number 2, it's important to be cautious in order to make good decisions. And then number 3, it's important to be cautious in order to protect yourself and your loved ones. So, that gets us started with our proverb today, and I want to hear what our guest has to say about this proverb. The proverb says, "The chameleon looks in all directions before moving." The chameleon looks in all directions before moving. Will, what do you think when you hear this proverb?
Well, it's interesting, as you were saying, your lessons about being cautious. Obviously, that's one way to interpret it, is for sure. But I think also in the context of our conversation today and my book about my 7 Black fathers, I think I thought about it in the way that we all need mentorship and fatherhood and motherhood and guidance before we take our next steps. And part of that looking in both directions is seeing who's the village surrounding us, and how do we rely upon them and use their wisdom and guidance and love to move to the next step in our lives. And I think if we're not looking for that, if we're trying to do it alone, we're going to be more likely to misstep. And so that's kind of what spoke to me about this proverb. The great things about African proverbs is they can mean so much. They're so rich. But that's what kind of leapt out to me when I first read this.
Thank you so much, Will. I appreciate that, and we will hear from many of our friends also who have spent time thinking about this proverb, because I share it earlier on our platforms. But I want to continue on with our conversation here. One of the stories I share with many of my guests here is when I was around 8 to 12, I used to distribute milk and bread in our neighborhood. I had a bicycle, and we lived in a very rough neighborhood. First of all, it was always dark. Electricity was not, available for everybody. And so my mother had this business where she hired many, many young men, and she gave each person a bicycle, and then she would get milk wholesale price and then distribute it to all the small kiosk owners, the shop owners within the slum. So I was one of these bicyclists, and every morning, sometime at 2 a.m., I would, get my bike, distribute my entire area. Everybody was given a zone in the neighborhood that they would distribute milk and bread to. So the discipline of doing that every day is why I've been able to do this show. We produce an episode every 5 episodes per week, and the discipline to do that, be a diligent father, run One Vibe Africa, non-profit organization, run a media company, One Vibe Media. A lot of people ask, how do you do that? And I always tell them that same story, that my mother taught me to work with our community, to provide what our community needs in order for me to provide for myself, entrepreneurship from a young age. And I feel that with all that you've accomplished, being a politician, being an author, being a father, and many other things that, we haven't mentioned, there is a story behind it. So I wanted you to take us on a journey and share with us, the places, the colors, the food, and we'll continue listening.
All right. I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that story. One of the things that I think is a hallmark of particularly African culture, but, other cultures share this too, is just and I talk about this in my book, the hustle, the discipline, you can, to strive for something greater, and to do whatever you need to do to get it done. And so I really appreciate that story. When I was a kid, we were very, low income in American standards, and lived in a very small apartment with my mother, particularly when my parents divorced. My dad's from Nigeria, and my mom's from the U.S., from Kansas. And they get together and they split when I'm 6 years old. But even before that, we're low income, even when they're together. But when we're relying on just my mother's income, it's really a difficult time. And I remember we would take public transportation, we'd take the bus and, walk a lot to where we were going. And I ended up going to 5 schools before I'm in 8th grade. I'm bouncing around quite a bit, trying to find my place. And I described that story in the book. But, one of the things my mother always would remark is that I always had a sensitivity to injustice, in that when something was wrong or someone was hurting, I would always say something about it, and she called it, I would get up on my soapbox, and try to say like, hey, what's going on here? And, a couple of instances that come to mind, we were walking down the street one day, I think I was about 7 years old, and I had just been given $1, which is for a 7-year-old, it's a lot of money, right? And I saw someone that was experiencing homelessness on the side of the road, and I asked, well, why is he there? She said, well, he doesn't have anywhere to live right now. Or he's, and I said, well, that's not right. So I gave him my $1, and my mother said, well, you just got that $1. I said, yeah, but I think he needs it a little more than I do. I think of another scenario where there was a young man at my school who was obese, and he had very thick glasses, and the kids made fun of him. Kids in middle school make fun of everybody, but this kid had a tough situation. He wore dirty clothes to school, and he got made fun of a lot, and he didn't have food for lunch. And so I would take my lunch to school. My mom worked hard to make my sandwich and my lunch, and I would always share my lunch with him. And so it's just things that, even as a young child, I think back of like why I became a civil rights lawyer, why I work in policy, why I worked in the White House trying to help improve people's lives. I think I just had a sensitivity because of my upbringing, and to other people's suffering and other people's needs. And I try to remember that, because I think all of us should try to have that sensitivity, that empathy. The world would be a better place.
Thank you so much. As you're speaking about these stories, especially your generosity from a young age, and then, I also look at some of your biggest accomplishments. One of the things that I've always admired, one of the people I've also always admired is President Obama, but one of his initiatives was My Brother's Keeper, something that, from being in Kenya and then living in Seattle for a while, I felt like, I could reach out, I could be a part of that. But the mentorship, it seems like the people you walked around, drew you to these kinds of circles, and, from a very young age, you are always with people who were generous to you. Then you could be generous to others, even with the only thing that you had, and I wanted you to, before we jump into your work with My 7 Black Fathers, I want you to just take us a little deeper in your involvement with My Brother's Keeper, and how that led to where you are currently as a leader, because many times, especially in the African immigrant community here in the US, we shy away from political office, and I just finished helping a non-profit organization that was working with 29 other non-profit organizations do a campaign to figure out why African people in Washington state were not being vaccinated, So, we did a lot in terms of storytelling and just bringing the community together. But you realize that if we had one of us in office, we would get the vaccines on time. We'd get the resources that we need on time. And we don't see the value of that yet. So I wanted you to just speak to why you chose this path, how My Brother's Keeper, contributed to where you are today. And then we will go and talk even a little deeper about your work when you get to My 7 Black Fathers.
Yeah. And I want to point out that we're wearing similar shirts too. So we didn't, I don't know if we coordinated that or not, but um, yeah, my Brother's Keeper, just so those who don't know, it was an initiative started by President Obama that I was part of at the very beginning to improve the life outcomes for Black men and boys and Latino men and boys, boys and men of color, and who have, as you know, across the world, uh, some of the worst outcomes of life, whether it be poverty or incarceration or lower life expectancy, lower earnings, go down the list. We have challenges because of institutional uh, and racism and many other factors. And so this was about how do you look at the life of a young man and boy of color, make sure that at key moments that they're on track, reading by third grade, graduating high school on time, not interacting negatively with the criminal justice system, leaving college, getting college or post-secondary education that prepares you for a career. And how do you make sure that we make key interventions and then provide a basis of mentorship and guidance throughout that process? And so it was one of the things I was most proud of to work on with President Obama and with many others, because we are our brother's keeper, we are our sister's keeper, and that structure has remained. It's part of the Obama Foundation. There are programs running in cities, in states, in counties around the country and around the world, really. And it's an effort to catalyze that change because we need it. This population has a significant and unique challenges. So it means how we address them, the solutions have to be specific and unique as well. And it's something that's ongoing, and it's something I've been very proud to work of. And it's at the core of, the message in my book about how we lift each other up and provide each other with the support, the tools, the love, the guidance to keep us on track in that life continuum. I know we'll talk about my book, and Obama's one of my 7 Black fathers, but I certainly learned that from him, watching him, working with him, and then being a part of this My Brother's Keeper initiative is a big part of my development and growth.
Wow, thank you. I would love for us to dive deep into your book now. I would love for you to grab it if you have it, and I want you to think about since you published the book, and I've also published a book this year, and just to get it out to the public was a relieving feeling, but also to hear feedback from people. I remember my daughter, I have 3 daughters, and the oldest loves reading, so the others are now avid readers. Like, we have fights for stopping them from reading because the oldest, like last night at 10:30 p.m. she was still like, I have to read, I need my reading light on, and we're like, you have to sleep too, Yeah,
exactly.
So the culture of books and just encouraging our young ones to be readers, because if you're not a reader, you can't be a writer, you can't be a good writer if you don't read enough. So I want you to pick your favorite excerpt and read it for us, and then I want you to talk about what is it that you're most proud of since you published. I take a book as a body of work, because every chapter, when you think about artists releasing albums, every chapter is like a song, and so it tells a different story of the same theme. So I just want to first of all, before you read the excerpt, I want to welcome our audience members. We have a little over 20 people have been in and out of the Clubhouse space with us. We have 13 people right now listening, and a couple of people on YouTube listening. Thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe to the channel. The link is at the top of the Clubhouse room. And if you're watching on YouTube, remember to subscribe to the channel. My special guest today is the author of My 7 Black Fathers, and he's a politician in office as we speak, but also he's a father, and he's a mentor. And I just feel really, really privileged to end the week with you as our guest, Will Jawando. So share with us your excerpt, and then we'll continue the conversation.
I appreciate it, Simon, and welcome to everybody as well. Yeah, and not only are we wearing the same shirt, we both have 3 daughters. So I have 3 daughters and a son. We have 4 children, but my oldest daughter, the 3 girls are first, and all of them as well are avid readers, especially my 2 oldest that are 12 and 10. I'm in the same boat. I have to come turn that reading light off at night and drag and pull the book and take the glasses off, at night. So, so as I mentioned, it's My 7 Black Fathers. I have the book here. I hope that you'll pick it up if you haven't already. And it's a memoir, but it's told through the lens of these 7 Black men who are my surrogate fathers, but and my biological father as well. I'm going to read an excerpt here from the introduction, which tees up kind of the premise of the book, and I think kind of sums it up in a way. So I'm going to read a paragraph or so here. And this is from page 11. A father in the home matters to his Black son. And in these communities, a father in one home is potentially a mentor to a boy in another. I know that when I'm considered successful, I'm seen as a Black boy who transcended his circumstances. That's not the real story. I am who I am today exactly because of my circumstances. The single greatest difference between Kalfani and me during those critical adolescent years was the Black men that I gained access to because of my mother's job and where I went to school. These Black men, my mother's colleagues, certain teachers, my stepfather, taught me how to navigate the world and find my place in it. The Black men in my life made me an emotionally fatherless boy, whole. And it was being made whole that enabled me to take full advantage of all the other opportunities that came my way, including a new story with my biological father, an emotionally present relationship with my children, and the ability to be a partner worthy of my wife. The power of these Black male mentors is that they make America a more just place for Black boys and a better place for all Americans. My 7 Black Fathers tells the stories of the men who have shaped my sense of what it means to be a Black man in 21st century America. Joseph Jacob, Mr. Williams, Jay Fletcher, Wayne Holmes, Dean Sanwuya, Barack Obama, and ultimately my own father, Olayinka Ishola Jawando. For Black men, having access to father figures can be the difference between a fulfilling life or poverty, incarceration, and early death. In each chapter, I explore the distinct and indelible ways these men, my 7 Black Fathers, set me on the path of self-love, service, and wholeness. So that's a little bit from the introduction, of just to get everyone excited about reading the book. And the way it's structured is, each man is a chapter. There's an introduction and 7 chapters. And you heard me mention Kalfani. He was my childhood friend that I meet in 5th grade, who takes me under his wing and is kind of a peer mentor and father figure, and unfortunately loses his life as we're graduating high school in a gun violence and a drug deal gone bad. And so I just wanted to give context to that sentence. And he didn't have access to these men, these fathers, these mentors. And I think if he did, he'd still be alive. And it's one of the things I think about often in my work, and was certainly important as I reflected on these relationships that I was so privileged to have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Will. Your story, the excerpt you picked to read for us today, and your book reminds me so much about myself. Reminds me of the story of Kalfani, reminds me of my eldest brother who passed on. for exact same reasons, not having the right people around him, and then this podcast, what inspired this podcast is that I had a friend that, lost his life to suicide. He was also a father of 3 kids, very much it could actually be you or me, and he was very successful as a music producer, as a video producer, and also he worked in the US Navy, So, one day his wife reaches out. He had moved from the US to Canada, also Kenyan, who lived here in the Seattle area. He had moved to Canada in Vancouver, just across the border. And one day his wife reaches out and says, hey, have you seen Philip? Have you heard from him? And then other people start reaching out. And so we are reaching out. Everybody's looking for him. A picture of him is put online. People are looking for him. And like 2 weeks later, we learn what had happened, And, we went and, gave him a send-off. But I was super scared, And then right after that, the pandemic came, So this is really a platform for us to be able to speak to African fathers and also, young men who are eventually going to be not necessarily biological fathers, but father figures. If you're doing something meaningful, you are already a father figure because people are looking up to you. However, at what scale you're doing it, however small the scale is, and I feel like your book should be translated into multiple African languages, especially because a lot of African people across the world are always saying, oh, our men are absent, and it's something that people used to say about us that now we are actually using to make fun of absent black fathers, to make fun of young, irresponsible African men. And I just wanted you to speak about, how your work and this book is trying to change that narrative, and how who you are is also trying to change that narrative, and how I feel that there's a community of responsible black fathers across the world, that are building platforms, that are doing the work to change the narrative. Just speak to that briefly, but also just share one tip to other young black men who are watching this right now. Imagine you are in Kenya. In Kenya, I run a non-profit organization called One Vibe Africa, and we have a physical space. In fact, there's a workshop going on there right now. Some of them might be watching. It's a film production workshop, and they're always looking for stories to tell. But majority of them are young black fathers. So I would love for you to imagine you're speaking to them. What is it that you tell them as a tip? Because Obama was in these same streets where these young men are learning film production not long before he became the president, So I'll let you speak to them and just share your perspectives in regards to the question I asked. And then I want us to bring on our guests, and I want you to take a pen and a notepad and just listen to some of the few comments we will hear, and then share your reflections as we get towards the end of our conversation.
Sure. And ask me the question one more time. Let me make sure I understand.
The question is, when it comes to the narrative that black men are not responsible, black men are absent, what do you have to say about that? And if a young man who is watching right now, especially those who are involved with programs like the Education, Music and Art program in Kenya that One Vibe runs, if somebody just told them that you are as irresponsible as your father, what do you tell them that they should do about that?
Yeah. Well, first thing I would say is that that is not true, factually, about black men not being engaged. Actually, I wrote a piece this Father's Day, which coincided with Juneteenth this year, the celebration of when the final enslaved African Americans were told they were free in Galveston, Texas, which is now a federal holiday. That Black men, Black fathers, are actually more active in the lives of their children than fathers of other races, as far as in the daily activities, cleaning, feeding, reading. We talked about our children reading earlier. That's not to say there aren't challenges in our society that keep more Black fathers from being connected with their children, like mass incarceration, like discrimination, and the like. But more than half of Black fathers live with their children. That there's this thing. There are many Black children are born out of to single parents that aren't married, but the trend is in the U.S. and nationally is that not as many people get married in general. So the actual stat is that the Black fathers, even if they're not married, many of them, more than half, live with their children. So that's one thing. It's just that it's factually not the full story. Now, does that mean we don't need more engagement? Absolutely. But the second part is, and this is what I seek to do in my book, is that we need to expand the definition of fatherhood. It's not just about a biological. Obviously, a biological father is important. Your biological parents are important. But I only have one biological father, but I have a book with 7 Black fathers. And each of them were necessary. Each of them were people who loved me, who guided me, who helped me learn the skills I needed to navigate the world as a young Black man, and who gave me ultimately the capacity to forgive my biological father, from whom I don't have a real relationship as a child. And so I think we need to expand that definition. If we all think about who are those men, those people that poured into us, that helped guide us, those are fathers, those are mothers, those are aunts and uncles, those are figures that matter. And how do we be that for more people as well? Like, we have a responsibility to do that as well. And excuse me, I think that's part of the issue here. And it's not, we all have something to offer. That's the last thing I'd say, is that you don't have to be perfect to be a father or a mentor. You have to just have intentionality. You have to have care and love, and you have something to offer. And it doesn't have to be your whole life. It could be for a short period of time. I only knew my 4th grade math teacher, Mr. Williams, who's in chapter 2 in my book, for 9 months, but I'm talking about him 30 years later. Obviously, my stepfather I've known for most of my life. So these relationships can vary in the size and type and duration, but they're all important. So I think that's what I would say to that, is that we all have something to offer, and you all have something to give, to receive. You have to be open to it. And the saddest thing that I see with our people is a callousness and a hardness that comes, that we shut down to having that connection, particularly for Black men and boys. And our job is to make sure that that doesn't form, and that we break it down, and that if we're all creating this village atmosphere, that there is love, there is care, there is guidance coming from so many people, that callousness can't form.
Thank you. I love that. I want to quickly give a shout out to Masha Mutisi, my Zimbabwean sister, who is watching and giving us really great comments on YouTube there. Thank you. My brother Will, I want you to take a pen and paper and take a few notes as we hear from our contributors on the Clubhouse space. And then I want you to reflect on what you hear, but also I want you to send us somewhere where we can all support you after you share your reflections. So right now I want to go to Mamzi. Mamzi, briefly share with us where you're joining us from. What is it that inspired you from my conversation with Will Jawando? And also, let us know your own interpretation of this proverb from Mauritius. It says, the chameleon looks in all directions before moving. Thank you for being here, Mamzi.
Hello, Simon. I'm glad to be here. I'm right now in Dublin. I'm still on vacation, and I have been listening and just smiling, because I think he is so right. African fathers are are doing great. African fathers are doing just great, and the media or whatever is being said on TV or radio, the trend, it doesn't really change the relationship that I see mostly with Africans, fathers and their children. I was very, very close to my father, and it didn't change the role he played. My mother, he died soon, but my mother could never even, fill his shoes. Like, they have a place in the life of children. They like, I always missed him. I mean, and I love my mom. I love my mom so much, but she cannot replace, she cannot be who my father was. So this conversation has been very interesting to me, listening and just appreciating. As for the proverb, it's just so right. To me, means be careful. Just take caution, right? Don't just jump, right? It's like when you have to swim and you get to the pool, you kind of stick your toes in the water a little bit before you jump in. You just don't jump in. So for me, it's the same thing in life, in business, even if your family. That it means just don't go blindly in stuff. That's what that proverb means to me. I'm still on vacation, but I'm coming back to the US next week. So I just came back to Clubhouse today. What a great thing to be in this room, Simon. Thank you for having me. My name is Mumsy.
Thank you, Mamzi. Thank you, and keep up the good work that you do for the children of Africa. You do amazing work supporting children who have no parents at all, actually. Brother Rushi, where are you joining us from, and what are your perspectives? What are your comments on my conversation with my brother Will Jawando is our special guest today?
Good morning, Simon. Thank you so much for the space and the opportunity to speak. I believe what Will is saying about fathers is so accurate, so correct. It's not. I think about my childhood. It wasn't just my father that helped me. It's just being inside a community and seeing the different men in the community doing different things, and being able to be inspired to do more, or to a lot of times it's about as a child, children are such sponges, so if you surround them with good people, good men, good women, those they absorb that. So I do appreciate everything he is saying. I totally agree. um, as far as the proverb speaks to me in reference to technology is what I think of when I think of this proverb. I think of technology and how on our journey through life, how technology is becoming more and more invasive. You know, the proverb talks about the journey of this chameleon looking both ways. And to me, this proverb is kind of synonymous with the saying that we use. We always say, Big Brother is always watching us. So we have to find a way to always be cautious of how we move, especially being I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and that's where I am today. And I'm sitting in my house, and I think to myself, even though I'm sitting in my house alone, I am not alone. Someone is watching me. I think about that all the time. The only place that there's any real solitude in my house is if I go in the bathroom, because that's the only place that there is no technology, or if I go outside in the woods. I think about that all the time. I have my phone in my hand. Your phone is always listening to you. I think about the Amazon, the Alexa speakers I have. They're always on. They're always listening. I think about my car, my Tesla. When I go outside, my car sees me. It knows I'm there. So everywhere you go, someone is watching you. So you have to be cautious about the things you do, the things you say. And also, I think about social media and how you have to be careful about the things you put out, because once you put something out, it's out there. You can't get that back. It's forever. It's forever in this digital world. You got to think about the pictures you put out. You got to think about the words that you type in emails. You have to think about the comments you make on social media. You have to always make sure that you're representing yourself in the right way as far as whatever you put out in this world. Because right now our world is very digital. It's not an analog world. That's probably what how parents or grandparents had. It's a very digital world. So you have to be very cautious about the things you put out on this journey we have through life at this point in our existence. So I thank you for the time, Simon. I also thank Will for the book, and I will be picking up the book to read that because I'm very interested on how the men played a role in his development. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, my brother Rushi, for your contribution. Yes, will share with everyone how you can grab a copy of the book and support the amazing work that he's doing. Let's hear from Lavender. Where are you joining us from? And, what inspired you, whether it's the proverb or just a brief comment. As we are going towards the end of our conversation, I just want us to just, give our brief comments, and then we come back to Will so that he can share his reflections, and we be respectful of his time, and then we wrap up our conversation today. So Lavender, share where you're joining us from and just what inspired you in everything you've heard so far, or your comment on the proverb.
Hi, Simon. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry. I'm on the move. I'm moving around a lot, but I wanted to listen in because today's proverb is so powerful, and I'd love to learn because these are things we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Thank you so much, Simon. This is Lavender. I'm speaking from Kenya. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome, Lavender. Thank you. One of my favorite things with this show is to listen to the background of everybody who pops in to contribute. So, I just love that. Latanja, how are you? Just briefly share with us your perspectives as well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Simon. And when Will spoke about the emotional aspect of fatherhood, it reminded me about how emotional stability seals the connection between fathers and children, as it highlights the narrative about why men don't cry. We hear that a lot. And the proverb that says the chameleon looks in all directions before moving, I briefly read something that says chameleons' eyes are independently mobile, and because of there are two separate individual images that the brain is analyzing of the chameleon's environment. And so this reminds us to move strategically, intentionally, and proficiently. Be mindful when taking calculated risks in order to become better at trusting the process. Another thing about mobility was it was deliberately denied for Africans that were enslaved and detained. So, therefore, being able to freely move about is important towards the benefit of free will, free choice, and freedom. So, be like the chameleon while moving through life unapologetically and uniquely you. And I yield.
Thank you so much, Latanja. Let's go to Jay. Jay, how are you? Where are you joining us from? And what are your own perspectives?
Good morning, Simon, Will, and everyone in the room. I'm joining you from Seattle, Washington. I will have to listen to the replays. It's incredible, Will, that you are here, that Simon brought you on. I just wanted to say about that chameleon, it's just wisdom. And fathers that are pumping wisdom into their children give them an advantage. They really do have an advantage in life. And fathers can certainly be part of your tribe of people, of men that you associate with. But to me, there's nothing like a true biological father. So when people tell you, you look like your dad, you sound like your dad, you walk like your dad, you act like your dad, you smile like your dad, well, that does something to a child when you don't really know who that father is, that biological father. to some degree. And it's always there, even though there's other really powerful men in your life that have made an impression on you, there's still a little hole in your heart when your biological dad isn't there for whatever reason. And so that's all that I wanted to say on that. Thank you so much. I will be listening to the replay, and I'm going to need to get that book. All right.
We'll let you know how. We'll let you know how in just a moment. Debbie, how are you? Where are you joining us from, and what are your perspectives?
Greetings and appreciation to all. Debbie Berlin, Game Dev Debbie, Maryland, D.C. Regarding the guest, thank you so much for sharing those fathering statistics and for affirming that the village and the community we influence the raising of all the kids. And it's so, wow, what a synchronous moment, because I have your library book in my car and I heard the title of the book and I was like, wow, perfect timing. So it's so exciting to hear you speak about your work. Regarding the proverb, you know, the chameleon looks around first in his environment, but do you know the chameleon can change its own color? And to me, that's like it's tapping into its chakra of choice and saying, today I want to be red or green and navigate this world. And so, wow, what a fashion statement. I admire this chameleon. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Bibi, how are you? Where are you joining us from, and what are your perspectives on today's conversation?
Good morning, Simon. Hi, Jay. Good to see you. And Mumsy, hi. Good to see you too. I hope all is well. And great conversations indeed. It's very important to have fathers in our lives, especially for the boys. And I know mothers have always been there, and I am so great that in the last few years fathers have stepped up to raise their children from ground up. Even if my son's bio hasn't been there, he just chose not to be present in my son's life. So the first 10 years of my son's life, it was just me, and my sister has helped out as well. And now that I'm married, my husband has stepped up to actually be present in his life and help him guide him and everything. It's just been great and beautiful, and I love seeing that. And I'm seeing more and more men step up, which is amazing. Thank you so much, Simon, for your work in your daughters' lives and our guest today. And I'm definitely gonna check that book out, including yours as well, and read it, and then of course give it to my son as well. That way it'll inspire him to keep his head up and learn that you don't have to rely on just one person, because it really does take a village to raise a child. And as far as the proverb goes, when you're planting a seed in a garden, you just don't throw the seeds in the ground or just put everything all together. You have to know the end results before actually planting the seed. How big of a space that seed is going to take, or how small, or the fruit of the seed that you're planting, and you have to observe everything and know what the outcomes of that seed that you're holding in your hand going to be before you plant it in the ground. So that's a whole nother proverb on top of that, but I just wanted to share that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Bibi. Appreciate you being here with the little one too. You know, they hear. There's another saying that children are our ancestors. So you just brought our ancestor into the room. I appreciate that. Stella, you are our last contributor to the conversation today. Before we come back to our special guest, where are you joining us from, and what are your perspectives on today's conversation?
Thank you, Simon. Hello, everyone. This is Stella from Kenya, and I'm glad I joined before the show ended. Even though I didn't quite hear what the guest said, but I'll listen again so that I can get it. But from what everyone has said, I love what you talked about on fatherhood, and I love it. So on my contribution about this proverb, I think as much as the chameleon is trying to warn us to be cautious and careful, uh, the proverb is also encouraging us to be brave and embrace change, embrace failure, and learn from it. And I think so because even though the chameleon looks left and right before crossing, the I think chameleon is always aware of the consequences. Like it could get killed by some passing car or anything, but it's still trying to reach its destination. It's still trying to go for its goals. So as much as you're being cautious, again, we have to sometimes you just have to throw yourself out there and reach for your goals. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Thank you, Stella.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stella and Lavender are part of the One Vibe team that make this show possible. So if you haven't connected with them, please do. But now I want to come back to you, my wonderful brother, Will. What did you hear that moved you, that you want to speak to? And also, how can we support your work, as we are coming to the end of our time together today?
Well, I'm just very inspired by so many of your words, and I wish I was on the Clubhouse app so I could have seen everybody. But I have to just hearing everybody was great. The first person that spoke talked about the media and the stereotypes. That's such an important thing. There's been so many lies told about who we are as Black people, intentionally. Especially for the last 500 years. To justify the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade and to dehumanize the people on the continent of Africa. And those lies exist and are perpetuated and have become internalized in many. And it's really important that we tell the truth in the fullness and the wholeness about who we are as people. So it's one of the goals of the book, and it really makes me happy to hear that came through in this conversation. Someone mentioned about the special relationships of fathers at their children. I think that's an important point here too, is that children need relationships. They need their mothers. My mother, there are women in my book, obviously, my mother, my wife, other key mentors, and they played a significant role. My mother was a constant figure, and I wouldn't have made it without her. But she also knew I needed these other relationships. And so if you're a single parent or a single mother, and like one of the sisters mentioned, a father has chosen not to be involved for whatever reason, or if there's death, there is this village. We are here. There is a path to fatherhood for every child if we all step up and provide it in whatever form or fashion. And so I really appreciated that acknowledgement. And the acknowledgement that it wasn't just my father. You could have a great father or have no father at all, and that you still needed and have had, many of us could think about who are our 7, who are these people that gave these relationships to us and how important they were and inspiring they were. And to be uniquely you, I think someone said, which is exactly right. We all have something to offer. So this was great. I enjoyed this part of the show. It's normally me talking. I enjoyed listening to other people. And to the point that was made, you can get my 7 Black Fathers. It is available anywhere books are sold. You just type in my 7 Black Fathers. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on, there's a Save Bookstores website, which is, you can find a local independent bookstore and buy it from there. You can buy it at the Macmillan website, which is my publisher. So if you just type in my 7 Black Fathers, it'll come up, and I hope you purchase it. I also recorded the audiobook, so if you like listening to me, you can do it that way as well.
Thank you so much, Will. But how can we also stay in touch with you? I know we can support you by getting a copy of the book, but even me, I actually want to figure out how I can see what you say as often as possible.
I appreciate that. Yeah, well, my 7 Black Fathers is the book, but my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's all my first and last name just together. So it's right on the screen right now. Will Jawando is my willjawando.com is my website. You can contact me there, or you can send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, which is all Will Jawando. So, and yes, as Marcia brought up, the library has the copies of the book too. You can also borrow it there. So, but yeah, Will Jawando is how you find me on anything, and then willjawando.com is the website.
Wonderful, wonderful. Marsha is also known as Lady Lion. You know, she's one of the she's one of the Zimbabwean lions that are lionesses that are keeping the African community going here in Seattle. And I just feel privileged that she's actually here with us. Thank you again, Will. It means a lot. It means a lot, really. Your presence here today, you know, gives a breath of, fresh air to the daily African proverbs, and to our audience members who are listening or watching. Thank you. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and also follow the African Father in America Club on Clubhouse, and nominate your friends and community members to join. With that, we've come to the tail end of our conversation today. See you on Monday. We do this Monday to Friday, 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, same place. Thank you so much. We'll have a nice weekend. Thank you so much.
You too. Thanks for having me.
All right.
African Father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. African Father, tujikaze, America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze.
You are listening to African Father in America podcast by Simon Javan Okelo, live from Seattle, Washington, USA.